Carrying a large pocket knife as an EDC can be fun, but sometimes you just crave something lightweight, small, that fits snugly in your pocket. That's why I got me Kunwu GRINGO. Let's do some size comparisons. Couple knives from Andre de Villers, South African maker. This is Pit Boss 2, and its slightly larger companion, the Crusher. Here are a couple mid-sized knives from Greg Medford, Praetorian T, and the Marauder. And here's a gentleman carry knife. It's a Rainmaker by Olight Tactical. And here's an interesting knife. It's a collaboration between Tony Marfion and Mick Strider. Forgot what it's called, but it's cool. Maybe a Batwing? Write me a comment, please. Here's the full-size Benchmade Crooked River. And oldie but a goodie, full-size Onslaught. Now let's compare it to small knives, like this Cold Steel AD10 and AD15, both designed by Andrew Demko. And speaking of Andrew Demko, here's the US-made AD20. And lastly, Sniper Blades DMF and LPC. And of course, while they're just as small as the Gringo, they have much thicker blades, which makes them quite heavier. Bottom line, if you want a small, lightweight pocket knife, I think Gringo is a great choice. Sorry, of course I'm just kidding. It's a pretty large knife. Not huge, but definitely not small, and not even medium. But did you know its weight is actually exactly the same as Microtech MSI, the FRN handle? And it's actually 1.7 ounces lighter than the Buck 110. And here they are side by side. The difference from the other knives that I just showed you, this one has an incredible balance. I know you heard people say that before. It will not feel as large as it is in your hand. And it's not just because of longitudinal center of gravity being in the right spot, but it's also pretty broad in a blade. So the weight distributes differently than, say, the weight of the MSI. I would say the closest comparison in balance, as well as size and ergonomics, is Spyderco Shaman. You can see the uncanny similarities in just about every aspect of these two knives. Yes, Kunwu has a slightly broader blade, but in hand, these two knives feel identical from any perspective other than just aesthetics. Here comes my favorite part in working on these videos, looking at the edge close up with my handheld microscope, which is connected to my iPad right now by USB-C. It works with your phone, whether it's Samsung or iPhone, doesn't matter. And it's an invaluable tool, especially if you sharpen a lot, to get close and personal with the edge. I start with the tip because how well the tip is formed indicates how experienced was the sharpener. This tip is not horrible, but it's far from perfect. You can see it doesn't come to a point. It has a radius at the very end. And that usually happens due to overstropping or not controlling the grind angle. The rest of the edge looks great, actually. Solid A, except for the tip. To be honest, at this level of hype, premiumness, and price, I was expecting better. The grind angle seems to be consistent throughout the length of the blade. And let's see the spot where the primary bevel and the plunge line and the edge are intersecting. There's a little bit of the shark fin geometry there, meaning the grind climbs up onto the plunge line. Don't know if it's a big deal because I think a couple sharpenings will take care of that. Flipping it over, this side looks better. See it? That's how it's supposed to look like near the sharpening choil. And the tip is a little better on this side as well, leading me to suppose and speculate that the person who did the sharpening is very dominantly right-handed. I would like to illustrate how a perfectly sharpened blade should look like, because very recently I reviewed a US-made knife, a Buck 791 range Elite in MagnaCut, and its tip looks like this. It's perfection. Good job, Bach. The knife was $225, and look at the perfectly formed apex there, as well as a very pointy tip. If you're kind of beginning to get into all these knife nerdy details, you probably heard reviewers use the term BET or BET or behind the edge thickness. So what is it? So traditionally, this part of the knife, the flat here, it's called primary bevel because it has an angle and it's consistent usually on most knives. And then there is the secondary bevel, which people commonly call the edge. And if you measure the thickness right where they meet, the two bevels meet, that's going to give you a behind the edge thickness. So both angles, the primary and the secondary bevel angles, also are important for how the knife feels when it's cutting. The more obtuse are the angles, the more resistance after the apex splits material on a molecular level. On the molecular level, immediately as you cut, there's resistance encountered by the secondary bevel, and then some additional resistance encountered by the primary bevel. Sorry about being that technical. I hope you are just as nerdy as I am. I did all the measurements. Then the thickness behind the edge is 14 thousandths here. The overall blade thickness is 140 thousandths. So if you calculate the angles, you get about 7.4 degree angle. If you have questions about my math, I'll be happy to write it out in a comment. If you take, for example, this Excalibur by the same company, they are same behind the edge 15 thousandths, just a 1,000 difference I measured. Behind the edge thickness, same width of the secondary bevel, but the primary bevel is a little bit narrower, and that changes the angle to 7.8 degrees. So technically speaking, if you have calibrated hands and you're cutting and measuring in your mind which one goes through material, which easier or which goes harder, then the Gringo will feel just a little bit, almost imperceptibly a better slicer than Excalibur. Doing the same math for the Shaman, let me see my cheat sheet. I got a little bit more behind the edge thickness, but a much shallower primary bevel angle. So this has 5.3 degree primary bevel angle. So while it will be a little harder to start the cut, it will slice through thick material like cardboard actually easier, and it's going to be perceptibly easier than either Gringo or Excalibur, if it makes sense. Now, those are small differences in the real world. A person who works tool day in, day out probably won't even notice the difference. But all three of these knives are designed for slicing performance. I hope it makes sense. Pardon me again for being super technical. I can't help it. The way I usually check the sharpness on my channel, if I don't want to get too much into the weeds, I cut an unsupported piece of cheap paper towel because it has this kind of rough, fibrous edge, and only the sharpest knives can actually break through that edge. If you don't believe me, try it with your sharpest knife. And let me see the Excalibur performance here. Now, this one I've been carrying for a while, and at this point, I think it's about C plus level of performance. Right out the box, it came pretty sharp. It was cutting paper at maybe B plus level. And here's the Gringo. And this one is straight out the box and breaks right through the edge. Let me go slowly. So there's no trickery. And then it continues to slice really well. Maybe not as well as the Bach 791 that I recently reviewed in MagnaCut, but almost there. So definitely A minus, maybe B plus at the worst. And earlier I compared it with the Shaman. So here's the Shaman performance, and it's also at the same level as the Gringo. Another way you can try that, maybe a little easier, if you just put it like this and see if it'll give you a nice solid cut on paper. This is a little bit cheating, and as you can see, Gringo having a thinner BET, it did this second task a little better than the Shaman. Maybe minor differences to some. Some of us are particularly crazy. I don't know if this will do it because I haven't touched up the blade. Yeah. So I carried, also it's a, what do we got here in the blade? It's a Vanax. Vanax is famous for corrosion resistance and toughness, and it has a little less edge retention, or significantly less edge retention than 15V or S390. These are crazy hard and wear resistant steels. I can say almost conclusively that performance-wise, these two are on par, with Excalibur being more attractive in its appeal, but slightly less performance in the edge retention department. But its forte is corrosion resistance, and both of these knives have almost none. Of course, this one is DLC coated, so it'll protect the primary bevel, but the actual secondary bevel of the edge can easily corrode if you leave it, if you neglect maintenance, I should say. So what's next? I think we should do the hardness test. That's why I have this guy. This is a Rockwell hardness tester. This is the industry standard tool. The method that I use here cannot be called industry standard though, because I'm only testing one sample at a time. So even if I had 5 knives of the same model from the same company, but from different batches, this still would not be an industry standard test, because the standard is to take, let's say if the batch is 150 or less items, you have to measure at least 5 to make any conclusion about the hardness of the batch. So this part of the test is for entertainment purposes, and the results can vary from blade to blade and from batch to batch. That said, some people see value in finding out if my blade will meet the promise that the company made, because the range they advertise for their knives, for this one it was 65 to 67, I think. If they make that promise, a randomly selected blade should be within that window. Let's go. As always, I start my hardness test by validating the calibration of my device. I have a NIST independently certified calibration block. It's serialized and rated at 62 HRC, 61.99 right there, and it's marked 62 on the side of the block. Right now I'm raising the calibration block and the anvil toward the fixed in place diamond indenter, and that applies a primary load of 50 kilos to the surface of the block. I zeroed out at this value and then release the major load. Here's my zeroing out. And as the weights descend, the anvil rises farther, pressing the block against the diamond indenter. What this dial measures is the difference in depth between the primary load and major load application, and that informs us as to what the hardness is. I'm going to accelerate the video 2x for your time's sake. Here's the Gringo's blade. Yet, as you can see, the video was shot in a single sequence. There's no cuts or edits to it other than accelerating it, setting the 0, and I put all my due diligence into these tests because it's important for the community to know where we're at. And we are at 66.7 HRC. S390 steel is one of the most hardenable steels available for knife making. And kudos to Kunwu. Sergio, thank you for selecting it for this knife. I could not find any other knives currently in open market that have that steel. If you hit the like right now, it would show your appreciation for what Sergio has done and for me putting some work into this video. So thank you in advance for doing that. Your like will help spread the knowledge within the community that this blade is measuring 66.8 on this poke. This consistency or repeatability is also an evidence of a properly done heat treat. The third poke, I'm going to put it right on the blade where it's visible. It's as close as I can get to the edge while still being on the flat of the blade. That is required to do this test. I don't have an anvil that can change angles, so I have to stay on the flat. By the way, subscribing to my channel or even joining it as a member for a very small monthly fee will help me work my way up to additional tooling, such as the angle adjustable anvil. On this poke, I got 66.9, so you can see it's right there, right under 67. And just to make sure, out of abundance of diligence and caution, I would like to do another poke on my test block to see if anything shifted during this test. It's not often that I get to test something as hard, so I always have my doubts, and I don't want to misinform anybody, so here we go. What was I talking about? Yes, so the membership is for the folks who would like to support my channel on a more consistent basis, and it's an incredibly humbling and inspiring experience to get a new channel member. I do promote some of my tools via affiliate links that are in the description, but I never promote items that I'm actually reviewing because I feel like it would taint my review. 62.1, we're well within calibration. So there is no doubt that this blade is at 66.8 average.